Hello and welcome to Monkeys with Fire. You join me tonight on another exclusive interview. And this evening we'll be talking to designer Tom Greenway, creator of Moonstone. If you are brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the latest miniature painting and tabletop gaming videos. Also, don't miss the live Twitch channel weeknights Monday to Thursday from 7 o'clock BST. Click the link below. And now, on with the show. Indeed, we do have Tom waiting on Skype to join us live, so I shall look across and see if he's all set and ready. We're getting thumbs up, so let's bring on in the mic. And here we go. So, good evening, Tom, and welcome to Monkeys with Fire.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So it's great to actually have you onto the channel. We, of course, have been looking at Moonstone over the last week or so, painting up one of the wonderful miniatures from the collection. And so we'll just give a quick check. So Snowyak is saying hi, Tom. So is Christoph and Ian. So you're getting all the welcomes from the chat.
Hey, hi guys.
All right, so what we always do whenever we have an interviewee on the channel is we like to sort of find out a little bit about their hobby gaming background, what their influences were as a child, I guess what they sort of grew up with in the hobby genre, maybe what sort of movies they were into, were they into comic books, things like that. So can you tell us a little bit of, what influenced you? What were you into as a youngster?
Well, and this is probably going to dive straight in. One of the things I was very, very interested in was art as a child, and specifically works of fantasy artists, including Paul Bonner and Brian Froud. So I had a pop-up book called Goblins by Brian Froud that I absolutely loved as a child. So even though I was perhaps only 4 years old, and most 4-year-olds, would end up damaging a pop-up book, I found it recently, and it's in practically immaculate condition because I'd opened every page so carefully to look at these crazy goblins popping up. Brian Froud, for those that don't know, is the art director who worked on both The Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. So I was into his books even before I was aware of those movies, but he created all of those characters. So I've always been into that sort of thing. I've got, I've just found this one of his books, The Goblin Companion. It's all these sorts of characters.
Wow.
This was what I was into as a child. So it's really probably no surprise when you look at these things, how I ended up creating the world of Moonstone. So from a gaming point of view, how I got started, I guess very young, perhaps 6 years old, my brother was already playing GW games. Typical for sort of anyone from Britain, the Games Workshop stores was my entry point into the hobby. So I was, I felt at the time that I was too young, so I was looking around Toys R Us for, toys, nights. I was always into fantasy and historical and fairy tale and that sort of thing. So I was looking for toys of that nature. And my mum said, why don't we have a look into the Games Workshop? And being at that age, I was a little bit intimidated. But I walked in and just instantly fell in love. They had a Warhammer Fantasy Battle table laid out with a full castle wall wiggling along one side of the board and some archers up on the walls, and the red shirt let me because I really didn't understand the rules, but I didn't care. It was the whole vision of it all. Let me control a rock lobber, and I was just hurling rocks at the castle walls, and that was it. I was hooked. So I got into Warhammer Fantasy Battle as as a youngster. I have only recently, within the last week, sold that first army.
Right.
I know it's kind of sad, but I've got such a lot of stuff starting to build up. I had to, so unfortunately, I don't have that very first goblin that I painted. But I went on to paint 3 quite large-scale Warhammer armies, even though I didn't really play the game. I didn't particularly enjoy the rules, but I had, full boards, full terrain, all the forests, all the armies fully painted, and I loved all that sort of thing.
So you really embraced the hobby in its fullness then, every aspect of it would sound like.
I did, yeah. I even did a little bit of sculpting around about the age of 18. I was quite into Blood Bowl at the time.
Yeah.
So I did do a little bit of traditional sculpting with green stuff. So it's not the best sculpt. I do have it here.
Oh, you've got examples. Excellent.
But it went into production. It was on sale. So Blood Bowl became a next love of mine, and I know you were keen on seeing some of my really, really early stuff. So this is my really, really early work. I don't know if that can be seen. Oh
yeah, just about. Yeah, that's cool. That's good. So how old were you about when you were doing that?
Probably about 10.
Right.
I think 10 or 11.
Excellent.
And then I guess by the time I was 18, I was sculpting. So that was a model that I sculpted, and it got sold on Impact Games for quite a number of years. They kept sending me royalty payments for about 10 years, which was lovely.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So that's some of my earliest stuff.
All right, excellent. So you really do have a sort of gaming and artistry background, because I know that some people that we've met from the industry sometimes come from just one direction, but you seem to have had the full spectrum.
No, definitely, yeah. Both the gaming side and the artistic side. I mean, with Moonstone, I'm sure we'll probably talk in more depth about how that started, but the very, very first step I did was doing artwork. So before I'd even written a rule, I don't know if any of your listeners have got the Moonstone rule book, but dotted around inside the rule book, if I flick quickly, you'll find some pencil drawings.
Right. Yes.
On Fancy Hat. So that was, some art that I was doing effectively just for fun.
Right.
Just drawing some fancy characters, and he's now in the game, which is, really awesome to see. So yeah, some of these early drawings, they're not as good as our professional artists now, but some of these early ones were my work, and you can definitely see the Brian Froud influence in them.
Yes. Now, see, again, this is very interesting because with game design and game publishing, you can have people who create the design of the game, the mechanics of the game, and then the theme and the characterization is built on top. You, of course, have come from the other angle of designing the characters.
It's a funny one because it was all happening very much simultaneously. I was drawing these characters for fun, and I was also I have written numerous games in the past throughout my life. Nothing that I've ever taken to the extent of Moonstone, but I used to go to games clubs and create games and take them along and play them out a couple of times with friends. Each time getting, I guess, progressively more serious, more in-depth rules, perhaps creating my own art for card games and things like that. And a long-term friend of mine from school, Richie Pascal, who a lot of Moonstone fans might know because he's appeared on quite a few of our videos and is very active in the community, and has written a good deal of the fluff and the background story. It's really more his area than mine these days, but he and I were very good friends in school and through into uni and adulthood, and he was working on a game called First Law Override, which was a science fiction skirmish game. It was we used to say it was a lot like Necromunda, only better. And I still think that. I really do. I think the rules we wrote were much, much better. But I came on board with him to help out with writing the rules for that game. And as I was doing it, and I still think it was a very good game, and I'd love to go back and revisit it at some point. But whilst I was helping him on those rules, I started to think, well, if I had my own game, what would I do? I would want it to be in this sort of fairy tale setting, because that's what appeals to me. I would want a game that would work for 2, 3, or 4 players, because I quite often, at that point in time, was playing with a play group that, you know, there was 4 of us. Sometimes not everyone would turn up. I wanted a game that was flexible in that way. And another thing is I have another hobby, which is historical European martial arts,
right,
or HEMA, as it's called, which is effectively competitive sword fighting. It's a reasonably new sport, or martial art. I guess it's only really risen up in about the last 15 years, but it's actually, we actually study from original medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. So in historical times, there were professional martial arts instructors and combat instructors who wrote these fantastic treatises with illustrations and lots of details of, if your opponent attacks here, you should, you know, smite him with a rising attack, and so on and so forth. And I was training that a couple of times a week, and I was very conscious that most of the tabletop games that I was playing were a very, very poor imitation, as far as I was concerned, of how it actually feels to be engaged in real hand-to-hand combat. I feel like a lot of games that I played, you know, you would, you know, just roll some dice. So I roll 3 dice because I have 3 attacks, and I've got 2 5s, and therefore I've done, you know, 2 wounds to you, and it's just like you had no interactivity in that process. You know, you just took some damage. It's almost as if you were stood there and I came up and went whack, 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 and then, okay, now it's my turn, I'll stand still and you hit me back 3 times. And I wanted a combat system that felt risky, just like real combat does. If you step in, you're liable to being hit back. You know, if you behave in a more guarded fashion, you know, you might not be able to inflict as much damage on your opponent, but you can do it in a safer way. And there's a lot of rock paper scissors counterattacks in these medieval treatises that I wanted to kind of get some of that feel into a miniatures game. At the time, I was playing a fair amount of Malifaux. And you may see some influences for that in Moonstone, and, you know, similar board size, similar number of characters on the board. And of course, as a lot of people know, Malifaux uses cards. But I felt a lot like when you were playing Malifaux, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, you flip a card off the top of a deck. And it's very similar because there's 13 values of the cards, the ace to 10, and then the jack, king, queen, king. That's very similar to rolling a 13-sided dice. And then you have, obviously, the suits, and you can cheat from your hand, but it's almost like rolling 13-sided dice and having a pool of resources that you can spend throughout your turn to increase, you know, and gain special effects, which to me felt like they weren't really using cards in all the ways that you can use cards. I was playing lots of other games at the time, board games and various strategy games, and, you know, there are things you can do with cards specifically used in the melee. You know, you can draw a hand of cards and you can make a choice, and you can have a lot more information on a card other than just a numeric value. So we have this deck of melee cards, and in the deck you have 6 different kinds of combat move that you can make whenever you are engaged in melee, either as the attacker or the defender. And they're quite cinematic. So we've got things like falling swing and thrust and rising attack and high guard and sweeping cut and low guard. And you each draw your hand of cards. The size of the hand of cards is equal to your melee skill, so that you have more options and more chance of getting critical hits. And you both study your hand of cards and you play simultaneously. So, if, for example, I was to play a falling swing, and my opponent was to play a low guard, you can probably imagine, just from the titles of the cards, that if I'm swinging from above and my opponent is guarded low, it's not going to work out very well for them. And that's precisely what happens. You look on the card and you find the name of your opponent's card on yours. So on the falling swing, you would look for the low guard, and the little damage table tells you that you've dealt 2 damage and suffered 0. And on the low guard card, it says the exact same thing in reverse. So you find the falling swing, which is there, and it will say that you've dealt 0 and suffered 2. And it goes more deep than that. There's lots of ways, the cards all have slightly different advantages and disadvantages. The guards, for example, don't tend to deal much damage, but they don't suffer much damage. If you don't like the look of a fight, you're more likely to choose that kind of card. You might choose a card that is more beneficial to the kind of weapon you have, or more able to penetrate the opponent's armor. So there's lots of decisions going on in your head. But ultimately, the cards operate very much in a rock, paper, scissors fashion, where there is no best card. The cards are all equally good, but every card has a card that can counter it, and then there's a card that can counter that. So if you're able to read your opponent and predict what they're likely to want to do, either by looking at your own hand of cards, which gives you some information on what they can't play, or by looking at their character and assessing what their best attack might be and playing the right defense against it, you can get into this real engaging play style which can last for years and years and years, and every single time you're agonizing over your hand of cards and you reveal, and it can be very dramatic.
Yes,
you might
most definitely.
both go for very, very aggressive cards, and you both do massive damage to one another, or you might both play defensively and just sort of skirt around one another, not doing anything. It's different every time and quite exciting. So I'm quite proud of that mechanic. And sort of going back to the origins of Moonstone, I was bubbling away having thoughts on how I would want to do melee in a way that felt that it had that realism to me. Around about the same time as I was drawing the characters, and I guess once those 2 pieces were in place, from then on, I fleshed out all the remaining details.
Right. I mean, yes, certainly once I was first introduced to the game, I instantly saw that it was a very sort of intimate game, is the fact of it's a small number of characters, and just the fact of them being individual really stood out to me, as opposed to big armies. And I loved the idea that I could invest time in these characters. And of course, the rule book has a lavish backstory to each and every one of them.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt. And I created the game that I wanted to play. So right. I wanted a game that supported 2, 3, or 4 players because that suited me. I wanted a game with a small model count because I really like spending a whole day putting my maximum effort into one model. I don't particularly enjoy anymore painting huge numbers of very similar looking models to a standard that I don't consider my best. So as I say, I created the game that I wanted to play, and that for me was a low model count where every single character is really interesting. I didn't want any rubbish characters. In Moonstone, you don't even have points values. So you don't have bosses and minions or anything like that. They're all equally powerful in the game, and I hope equally interesting in terms of their design and their backstory and their rules and their interactions with one another.
From the characters, then, I mean, do you have a favourite character? Was there one that you laboured over more than any others?
So I've known that this question was coming ever since we booked this interview in probably a month ago, and I still have not come up with an answer for you. The thing is, They are all my babies, and I love them equally. I can't even choose a favorite race, never mind a favorite singular character.
Okay.
If I was pushed, I would say that my favorite character is the Fire Spitter.
All right.
And that,
Yes.
I think, is because a few reasons. He was one of the first pieces of art that I drew, and I love I spent a lot of time thinking about how a goblin would make a flamethrower, and I love how it actually all makes sense. There's a big barrel on the back of the lead goblin, and it's filled with fuel. And there's a small goblin running up behind, pumping a bellows, and he's going to squirt, obviously, the petrol or the fuel, whatever fuel they use in Torba, through the candle flame. Perhaps you can make out.
Yes, that's good.
The faces and the characters are very amusing, I think.
So the comedy of the game and the characters, I mean, is that from you, or is there a group of people that contribute to that?
The comedy side is very much from me. We have, as I say, my good friend Richie has written a lot of the fluff, and he's picking up my comedy style, I guess, my rather immature comedy style. But his style tends to be a little darker. He'll tend to veer into darker territory, and I have to keep dragging him back to the ridiculous every
whimsical.
now and then. But we have characters with names like Baron von Fancy Hat and Doug the Flatulent and Boris the Bunny Summoner, yes, I guess I'm just very immature because I find that quite funny. This isn't a world of horror and war and grim darkness. This is has dark moments. As Richie's a fan of saying, a little bit of sour makes the sweet sweeter.
Yes.
There's some moments where where in the background you think, oh, blimey, that is actually a bit scary, but mostly it's got a kind of a jovial silliness about it that I don't tend to find in a huge number of other games out there in the kind of the miniatures skirmish game setting. They tend to be a little bit more colder, I suppose, without that kind of humorous touch.
So obviously the name Moonstone, these are the sort of items that you are collecting, that you're fighting one another to collect as many as you possibly can during the course of the skirmish. Where did that come from? Where?
That is a very good question. So I used to play Guild Ball and Warhammer, and I found that what I really enjoyed doing was setting up the terrain by getting a handful of dice and assigning each number on the dice to be a particular piece of terrain. So I would drop the dice on the table, and wherever they landed, I would then replace it with terrain. So let's say a 6 was a forest and a 5 was a building. And I always found that was a really fun way of starting the game, dropping these dice and looking around and seeing how that was going to affect the game. So when I was in the process of coming up with ideas, and it was a big melting pot for Moonstone, it didn't have the name Moonstone, obviously at that point it didn't have a name, but I thought I'd like a game that focuses around objectives rather than killing, although killing is a very big part of the game. People are rubbish at digging up moonstones when they're dead, so that's still a good strategy. But basically, you don't ever score any points for killing. You only score points by the number of moonstones you've harvested. So I just like the idea of just dropping objectives and seeing where they fall. And knowing that would create a kind of an organic experience that was exciting and different every time. So once I got the idea of wanting to drop objectives onto the board, magic stones just was, it wasn't a big leap to say that they're magic stones that have grown up out of the ground. And yeah, the name Moonstone followed shortly thereafter, because I was thinking I want the game to have a certain number of turns, and I was like, why does it end after a certain number of turns? And I thought, oh, the sun rises and the stones melt. And then I thought, well, if the stones only come out in dusk, then Moonstones is quite a good name, and it's got a appropriately fairy tale, whimsical kind of sound to it, not too harsh. So yeah, just ran with it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine it any other way now. You know, the thing is with names, when you first have an unnamed product and you're throwing ideas around, they all sound a bit naff. But once you've had it for a few years, it's impossible to imagine this game with any other name.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I mean, how long did it take you then to sort of design the game? And I'll put that time up to, because am I right in saying that you launched on Kickstarter initially?
Yeah, so we've done 3 Kickstarters now. The first one, which was I think in 2016, was a pilot. So I just released the Fire Spitter model and the Baron von Fancy Hat model without rules. The rules were free online, but it wasn't a Kickstarter for a game. It was just for 2 miniatures, just to test the water. So at that stage, the rules were very much in beta form. There was a free PDF on a very rubbish website that thrown together, and I was playtesting it, about once a week with a group of friends. One friend in particular, Adam Caldecott, who was quite instrumental in some of the early stages of the rules. So I guess it's a little hard to say, from when I first had the idea of creating a game until the moment when this rulebook was printed, I guess that was probably about a 2-year period.
Okay.
And then since this rulebook, we've had another 2 years now, where the game's obviously, expanded. I guess it's 2 years, maybe it's 1.5 years. So about 4 years, I guess. 4 years from originally having the idea to being at the stage that I am now.
So you just mentioned that one of the first miniatures to be created in an actual miniature form was the Fire Spitter, which was one of the first characters that you sort of created. Can you remember, how did that feel to sort of get that first sort of prototype?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely incredible. The art, the sculptor at that point was working from my artwork, and then seeing his translation into 3D and thinking, wow, this is so much better than I could have hoped for. And then having it in my hands and being able to paint it, and sort of knowing that I'd followed that character through its whole journey from, a sketch pad and an idea that I probably had really late at night, because that's when most of my ideas tend to come to me. And then having the final result, it was absolutely wonderful. It makes it all worthwhile. Working on the characters, coming up with new characters, coming up with designs and playtesting them, and then especially seeing the art come back in. We've got an absolutely fantastic artist now, Shane Cook, who, he's absolutely wonderful. So all of the new characters are being created by him. And then we've got quite a good roster of sculptors, about 6 now, that I really, I'm incredibly happy with that kind of production line that we've got. I think the amount of personality that ends up in these characters, which has come a little bit from my original briefs and very rubbish now sketches. More character is then added in by Shane, who adds different ideas and different twists when he does the artwork. And then when I hand over to the sculptors, I'm always so impressed, particularly with how they capture the faces. Right. A lot of the Moonstone models have got very, very amusing faces, and I think I'd love to one day print them in larger, produce them in larger scale, because the sculpts are so detailed.
I was just going to ask that. A 54 or a 75 millimeter, these characters would be awesome.
Well, to be honest, when I first conceived of the game, I did consider making it a larger scale rather than the 32mm. Um, and I wonder whether I should have, we have some very small models. Our fairies are very small, and they have to be very small because if they were as big as a human, they wouldn't look like fairies. But I do wonder whether, if the game had been in a larger scale in the first place, that might have now been paying off. The reason I didn't is when I first was starting out, I didn't realise the game was going to be as much of a success in its own right as it's turned out to be. I thought perhaps we'd just produce a few miniatures, and Frostgrave was a really big game at the time, and I thought perhaps people would buy the miniatures with the intention of using them in other game systems. So I wanted us to choose a scale that was as normal as possible, that would sort of blend in with other games out there. You could mix them in with your Age of Sigmar or create a Frostgrave, and it would look fine. So that decision is now made. But what I would love to do, as I said, is produce some 54 or 78 mil versions of these same characters just for painters out there.
Right. No, that sounds amazing. We've been enjoying painting up obviously the large scale busts on the channel recently. Is that something you might even consider? Because these are characters, aren't they? And they work so perfectly in that sort of format.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've never painted a bust, a large scale miniature, but I'm getting more and more interested in that side of things. At the moment, most of my very limited painting time is spent on painting Moonstone miniatures because getting them pro painted is quite expensive and takes quite a chunk out of our revenue. And I paint to a reasonable standard these days. So I'm generally, if I think, I've got time to paint this weekend, I'll pick up a Moonstone model. Plus, I love them. I absolutely love them. So it's hardly a hardship. But it's definitely on something I would be very keen to do, is larger scale models just for painters in future.
So Snowiak is asking, what is the consistency substance of moonstones as they disappear in sunlight?
Oh, that is a brilliant question. So you've got me on the spot there. We talked about them basically evaporating into smoke. So they kind of sublime. They go straight from solid to gas. We did talk at length about this, whether they retract back into the ground when the sunlight hits them, or whether they melt. But the final answer that we decided to run with was that the sunlight effectively burns them and they evaporate away.
Right.
But that's a very good question.
Raw Eye is asking, any plans to let players submit character ideas for future expansions?
That's a good point. I tell you, one of the reasons why I haven't done that is because I've got so many ideas already. So I've never got anywhere near close to running out of ideas. And particularly when the first Kickstarter launched, and it launched, the game launched with, I think it was 32 characters. I'd already been playtesting with about 54 characters, and I actually had to trim it down to that first wave that went out in that Kickstarter, and I'm only now bringing out some of the characters that I've been playing with in my playtest games for about 4 years. So the Goblin Pirates and the Goblin Mortician, for example, have been in the game for a long time, and they're only now finally getting to the point where they're being released to the public. So I'm absolutely not against the idea of it, and perhaps what I would do is maybe do a competition or something like that. There's quite a few characters in the game which, weren't my idea originally, that someone else put forward. There's, quite a few characters are based on real people. If people hang around me long enough, I tend to write them into Moonstone as a character. Um, so you know, my old my first regular playtester, Adam Caldecott, is about to come to the game as a wily old soldier called Old Calders. My girlfriend, who's Swedish, is got written into the game as Joanna, the Nordic princess, and Kaufman was our Kickstarter backer who got the create your own character reward. There's quite a number of them actually. So one way is just hang around me, and I'll ultimately end up either writing you into the game or taking your ideas and stealing them and putting them into the game. But so far we haven't got anywhere near the point where I've been like, I can't really think of what to do next. That has never ever come up. I've probably got, even bubbling away in my head now, you know, there's book 1 had 32 characters, book 2 that is mostly written but is all in playtesting at the moment, it's got another 36 or no more than that. I think there's about another 50 coming in book 2 with the additions of the Lesher Vault as well as the ones that were already planned. And I've already got a list in my phone of maybe another 20 characters that I want to bring out for book 3, a new faction for book 3. Yeah.
So the recent Kickstarter I saw you, and you've already mentioned it, this is this third faction. Is it the Lesher Vault? Am I saying that
Lesher
right?
Vault, that's right, yeah.
So when will that actually be coming to sort of backers?
Very, very soon. So I've got the Resin Masters.
You've got them there?
I've got them here. Yeah, if you want to see them.
Cool. Absolutely. Come on, tease us something.
Yeah. Boris the Bunny Summoner. That's a definite fan favourite.
Yeah. I just like the idea of all the bunnies that go along with him. They look awesome.
Yeah, well, I've got them here. Where's the bunnies? There he goes, a couple of bunnies.
Yeah.
And we've got the Jackalope. So he makes, if his spells go particularly well, he can summon this guy.
Yes, there we go. That's it.
We have Lubard. This model came out really nicely.
Yep. So Snowyak's asking if you would be so kind as to show the Lion Man the Beast.
Oh, the Beast. Yeah.
Yep.
I can do that. There you go.
Now, yeah, that's definitely making me think of Beauty and the Beast going.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's the inspiration, or rather, it's a similar, thing that I was mentioning before. That character is inspired by the stories that were also the inspiration for the Beauty and the Beast.
Yes.
So, but he has come out looking an awful lot like the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. We have a few of these characters in our troop box called the Cursed. So there are 3 witches in the new faction, and each of them has cursed one of the Dominion humans, which is kind of our old wealth. Kind of, they're not actually out yet, but these guys are a bit of a preview of it. So they're dressed in these kind of more formal clothes with ruffles and things. So this character, Slasher the Beast, was basically very vain and proud of his appearance. So he got cursed to be a hideous beast. And this little girl couldn't control her temper, so she got cursed to have this monster inside her.
Yes. Yeah.
And she actually comes with 2 models, but I don't have the untransformed version with me. It didn't get printed for some reason. They forgot to print it. It has now been printed, but I don't have it yet. Right. And then we have the Revenant, who was cursed with undeath and his model is here. And he's another one I think we're going to be seeing on tournament tables because he facilitates some really weird, janky combos.
Right. Christoph's asking, are there different scenarios to play?
Yes, there are. In the current rulebook, there is 6 story scenarios. So I'm just going to flick through. So we've got this is how they're presented. So you have a page of storyline and then the rules for the scenario. Now, in the storyline, it specifies the characters that are involved in the scenario. But in most cases, you're free to chain, just use the scenario rules with whatever characters you have. Although it can be fun to follow the story, and actually, if you've got, a full collection of Moonstone miniatures, then you can follow the story and use all the characters as they're listed in the story. So there's six scenarios in this rulebook. This is the go home you're drunk scenario where Fritz, our mercenary, is in the previous scenario has managed to get a Moonstone, and now in this scenario he's gone to the tavern and got blind drunk. And any normal person at this point would stuff their Moonstone under their mattress and keep quiet and go off to the wizard's agents in the morning to get their prize. But he's so arrogant, he's just gone down to Agatha's Stone Moon Tavern and slapped his Moonstone right on the table in front of everyone and ordered a round of drinks and has got himself absolutely drunk. And he's trying to make his way home. So he's got a different version of his stat card where he's gone into full beast mode with extra wounds and he can no longer jog, he staggers about, and he's basically got to get from the entrance to the tavern back to the entrance to his house, whilst the other players, which can be 1 other player, 2 other players, or 3 other players, have gangs of bandits of 3 Moonstone models of their choice that are trying to mug him on his way home.
Brilliant.
So they're all, they're quite funny. We've got the sleepyhead scenario where everyone is still in their beds at the start of the game and they all come on randomly out of different doors and windows, and ambushes. There's quite a few of them, rescue missions. Now, in the new rulebook that we're in the middle of writing at the moment, there's currently a further 9 scenarios. So I would just like to mention on the new book, because a couple of people have misunderstood, the new book is not a 2nd edition. It's not going to change the rules. It's just going to add more characters and more scenarios and evolve the storyline. Because a couple of people have said to me, I'm not going to buy your book because I've heard that you've got a new one coming out, and that's definitely a misunderstanding.
Right. I mean, you've talked about obviously the village, the buildings, and in fact I can see one behind you there. So I'm right in saying that there is a range of scenery that
there is. Yeah, I've got all of them with me. So this is one of our small cottages. So these were available in the Kickstarter, and we'll be selling them on our website in the new year as well. They are extremely good value, I think. This is £7 for this building.
That's great.
So I have Phantom Cat's Manor House here, and I think this is only £14, which I think is
that's exceptional.
They all open. You can. Some of them, I think this one has. Some of them have got detailing inside as well. Just show these off because not everyone has seen them.
These are beautiful.
They're nice, aren't they?
Yeah.
Considering the limit, I glued that bit on wrong. Considering the limitations of MDF. My brief was I wanted them to be, I got my artist to do some sketches, but I wanted them to be all higgledy-piggledy and, as few straight lines as you can, which is not easy with MDF. I think they've done a really good job on them.
Awesome, yeah. Ian's saying that's character with the misplaced window frame.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
Oh, so is this the tavern? This is where...
Tavern, yeah. So you would use this in the go home you're drunk scenario.
Wow,
if you were playing
look at that.
the biggest one of all is the Wizard's Tower, which you can use in the Wizard's Agent scenario, or just generally as a terrain piece. But it's big.
Wow, 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 wow. Okay, yeah, we want that one. That's the one we want.
And this is only £22.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So we already, the chat's going, God, awesome, wow, oh my, yes. so there you go, guys. So these are going to be available in the new year.
They're in production at the moment for our Kickstarter backers. There's about 200 of each building. Oops, just dropped something there. There's about 200 of each building in production at the moment that will be going out in hopefully November. Our aim is to get everyone's rewards out to them in time for Christmas.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it does look like we're on track for that. And then after the Christmas break, we'll put them up on our website in the new year. For people to order.
Okay, so there we go, guys. So in the new year, that is when you want to head over. Well, if not, you should be heading over to the Moonstone website earlier, of course, but the buildings will be available in the new year.
Yeah, we've got quite a few new releases coming up at the end of this month as well. There's 2 new troupe boxes and 3 new monster boxes.
Come on, tell us more. Tell us more then.
Okay, well, so last month we brought out our Blood Magic and our Outlanders box, which was for gnomes and fairies. So this, at the end of this month, we've got a new expansion box for our humans and our goblins. So we have Kaufman the Merchant. Now, he throws bags of money around the battlefield and people scamper after them. And he has other tricks where he can bribe people to hand over their moonstones. We have Gertrude the Fairy Hunter.
This is one of the characters I saw that I liked. Yeah.
Yeah. Who is absolutely brilliant against fairies, as you might imagine. And the way the current meta is going, fairies are probably one of the dominant races at the moment and in the tournaments that have been running. So it's good timing that we have a fairy hunter just about to come out. And then we have Natty the Slum Thief, who is a very innocent little girl who sneaks up on you and robs your moonstones off you.
Right.
The other box set that's coming out, I don't have the resins yet, but they're all the sculpts are done and they're in production at the moment. Is the Goblin Pirates, the Booties Bilge. The Goblin Pirate sculpts are absolutely superb. Then we have the gnomish airship. So we've got a flying model.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm afraid I don't have the resins for these. And we've got Brunhilde, who is a giant, kind of a Nordic themed giant. So she will work well thematically with the new gnome box set that's come out. And she also works very well synergistically in a giant's build. So it's going to be possible to build a list for your Moonstone games, which is made predominantly of giants, because there's going to be 4 of them. And she buffs other giants. And then we have rival. No, we don't. We've got Bristlenose the Troll.
Oh, a troll!
So
a troll.
I could show you. I could show you actually on my phone. That's Brunhilde.
Oh right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me see if I can find. It's probably very boring watching me flicking through my phone, but I'm going to see if I can see any.
No, this is good. We're getting to see stuff that I haven't seen before. This is awesome.
Yeah. There you go. That's Bristlenose the Troll. He's due out.
Ooh, right. Yeah,
he's
yeah.
due out at the end of this month as well.
Why do I get the sense he's a bit aquatic?
He is. He's a river troll, but he's kind of designed to also look the part alongside the Goblin Pirates that are coming out. I'm just looking for pictures of the Goblin Pirates.
Ado's saying he likes the river troll.
I love him. I actually think he might be the best model we've done yet. Here's our airship, our gnome airship.
Oh wow! So how's an airship going to work in the game then?
So one of the things about Moonstone is that I have a few design objectives. The rules are actually really quite simple. Some of the mechanics are very engaging, but the core rules are quite simple. And you never have to look up a rule. There's no keywording in Moonstone, and there's no special rules. Everything you need to know is printed right on the stat card. So I had to write an ability on this character called Up, Up and Away, which effectively lists out all of the special effects that happen because it's a flying character. But ultimately, it doesn't engage in melee, and it can't be engaged in melee. It's immune to melee, so it only engages with the enemy using the arcane mechanics, which is our bluffing-based ranged spell casting deck of cards, which I didn't really talk about before, but we have this other deck of cards which we use when you're doing magic. It has these different colours and different numbers, and you draw a hand of cards, your opponent draws a hand of cards, and you go through a bit of a bluffing game to see how powerful your spell is and whether you manage to cast it. So the airship effectively only engages in the game this way and not through melee.
Right. Okay.
Which can be good if your opponent has brought a load of melee characters because they can't hit it and it's up there dropping bombs and shooting them with its crossbow in safety. But if you face an opponent that's got lots of a fairy line that's got lots and lots of magical attacks, then the airship might be shot down quite quickly. Amusingly, in a playtest game that I played recently, I was using the Goblin Pirates, and one of the Goblin Pirates is called Swiggity Swooty, and he's got an octopus on his head as a hat, and he's carrying a big chest of gold, but the octopus has got a weapon in every arm. And the fluff is that the octopus is a kleptomaniac and it steals everything. So one of his abilities is that he can steal abilities off other characters. So in the playtest game, he stole the up, up and away ability off the airship, bringing the airship down to the ground so that the rest of the Goblin Pirates could pile on.
My goodness.
Take it out.
Even Ado's saying, I want to see those pirates. They sound awesome.
There you go. There's the octopus head pirate.
Oh, brilliant. It's like a goblin version of what's in the Pirates of Caribbean? What's his name? Will Nighy's character.
Yeah, but they're really fantastic models. The goblin, the captain is riding in like a modified wheelbarrow. So he's got a wheelbarrow that he's captured off one of our other characters, and he's kind of made it into a makeshift ship.
Brilliant. Yeah, Pascal's saying these are awesome. Ado's saying he's sold on the idea. You've definitely got some fans here already.
Oh, good. I've got some more fawns coming out soon as well. So that's one of our new fawn characters.
Ah, that's nice.
So that'll be a direct-to-retail release in the new year as well.
So there's going to be a lot of activity.
A lot of activity, yeah. There's so much going on at the moment. I think it's a really exciting time to be getting into Moonstone because there's enough out there already that when you want to buy in, you're not waiting. You can buy in to the game and get started. But there's but it's early enough that you're not going to be. Because some games that are very well established, you might find them a bit intimidating because there's already a very competitive scene, or you're just overwhelmed by the amount of options. Moonstone's at that really nice stage at the moment, I think, where there's a small number of models that are already out there, so that if you get in now, you can kind of understand everything that's going on. But then there's lots and lots of exciting releases coming out imminently that you can kind of expand on and extrapolate and try out all sorts of different strategies. And Moonstone is a game I played collectible card games, and I really enjoy that deck building element and trying to come up with something clever and different. And that element is very, very true in Moonstone, where you can build all manner of different troupe combinations that do some really wacky things sometimes, just like you might be able to produce a combo deck in Magic, you can do the same thing in Moonstone, and you can obviously develop quite a sophisticated metagame where where if you're able to predict what kinds of troop builds your opponent is going to bring, you can build your own troop in ways that will counter it effectively. And all of that kind of exciting, fun metagame stuff hasn't really been a feature of the game to date, but is just about to become a feature of the game going into the new year. So it's, yeah, a really good time to get involved, I would say.
Right. I was going to ask, as a sort of conclusion, what would you say to somebody who hasn't got Moonstone to convince them that they should get involved in the game? But I think you've pretty much just summed that up, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know. There's an awful lot more that I can say. I mean, it's got some very unique mechanics, which has been very well praised. It's a very clean rule system. It's not one of these games where you have to make guesswork or roll the dice to determine what the rules are supposed to mean. It's quite concise and clean. It's obviously got a visual style which you would know by now whether you like or not, but people do. A lot of people do like. So yeah, check it out. We've got a very active Facebook players group, which has got over 700 players in it now.
Excellent.
So that's worth joining. If you look for Moonstone Players Group on Facebook, and there's lots of activity and lots of people posting up their painted miniatures and battle reports and asking questions, and I quite often drop spoilers and previews in there, and yeah.
So there we go. All right. So yeah, Christoph is saying love it. So I think that's probably a good way to sort of end things. Tom, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been wonderful to have you on the channel.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right then, Tom. Well, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now then.
Bye.
And there we go then, guys. So our thanks to Tom Greenway, designer of Moonstone, for the live interview this evening. What did you guys think? I know you really enjoyed the buildings there. Didn't they look awesome? I think I might have to be getting a few of those for my Moonstone board in due course. All right then, so thank you so much, everybody. I hope you really did enjoy that interview. I certainly did. I look forward to seeing you again on the channel soon. But until then, bye for now.